We'll wait 10 seconds so I can catch my breath, and then we'll get started, everybody. Good to see you all today. Thanks for putting this out, Chloe.
Do we have a new committee member?
Okay, well, I was just told by Chloe we have the numbers we need to get started. I just heard someone jump in. Was that Travis who was jumping in there?
Oh yeah, sorry, that was me.
Okay. Good to see
Yeah,
you.
I was hoping Michael would adjust his camera down just a little bit too, so we could.
Sorry, yeah, Brady is definitely the star of the show.
What a cutie!
Love it, love it. Chloe, I see someone in the chat. I don't know if there's something I need to be aware of.
No, that was me.
You, okay, very good. Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee meeting. New business items. First item on the agenda is the review and approval of the minutes from the last meeting dated August 13, 2021. I'll look for any discussion. If not, I'll look for a motion on the minutes.
Dave, I'd move to approve the minutes of the August meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Tony with a motion, Michael the second. Any discussion? Hearing that, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? None, motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda, Ann's already on it. Revisions to the impact fee study. Ann, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Hello all again. I know you didn't get this until just yesterday. I apologize. A lot of information was coming in at the last minute and things were changing. So I'm going to go over this document. It's in the same format as the one we had last month, and I'll show you where the changes are, and then we can address those and answer any questions that you have. Again, the primary edits since the last time we met, the support facilities for police, fire, and parks have been spread over 20 years worth of growth instead of being collected all in 10 years. That would have decreased the fees for this 10-year period a little bit. 3 projects were inadvertently left out of the park CIP. They've been added and highlighted on the CIP. I found an error in the calculation of fire and police equivalent dwelling units, and that has kind of normalized some data that I had last time that was a bit suspicious. So the first part is these growth projections. Chair Jorgensen was nice enough to give me data that he has carefully culled over the years and told us that rather than using the current split of single family and multifamily, we were going to really see a much closer split between single and multifamily in the future based on recent building permit data. So those have changed a little bit. And we'll show you the impact of those as we go forward. Let's see. Yes. So then in the updated police CIP, mostly we're talking about facility costs. So I was able to pull together some information with engineering on why facilities for police and fire might be more expensive than comparable sized other commercial or retail or industrial facilities. If you didn't have time to read the narrative, some of these things include the fact that we build these buildings for a longer life. They are more durable material than sometimes we might be building in the private market. The cost estimate is based on what the city actually paid for the downtown micro district facility when they built that in 2019. It was escalated by 5% annually. That got us to $637 per square foot. What you will see here is there is there's no land, no acreage purchase required, but there is, no, that's not true. We've taken the whole facility knowing that we have a little bit of the acreage to accommodate people downtown, but there would be land that would need to be purchased for an additional substation, which would likely be in the southeast. Here are some of the unique features that are present in police facilities, including secured parking with badge access, bulletproof glass, additional security camera systems, the fitness equipment in the locker rooms with the showers. And remember, in the dollar amounts that I am giving in these CIPs, this is inclusive of not only site improvements, land, acquisition, but also all of the FF&E, or the fixtures, furniture, and equipment. So a lot of these large pieces of equipment are also included in that cost. Then we move to the police support facility. Obviously, these kinds of buildings do not cost as much to build. We're using a $231 amount per square foot. Again, we spread it over 20 years. And so this would have reduced. What I've basically done is broken out into the growth percentage up here, which is 1,600 square feet, and the other 1,600 square feet would come in the next 10-year period. So essentially the city would need to front the money and then collect this other $370,000 in 2031 to 2040. Let's see. So again, the error in my projection of equivalent dwelling units on police calls for non-residential land uses was corrected, resulted in a recalculation of the fees. And this was one of the parts that I talked about. We'll really use this table. And Corbin, thank you very much for the Excel that you sent over. You saved me a whole lot of time because this is much stiffier than what I had. So I just decided to keep using it. So what you see is this updated police impact fees. So the per person amount is 145, which is slightly above the current amount. These shows you that it's about a 35% increase of the fees for residential. And then you can see with non-residential, the amount of increase. Now, some of why this is different from 5-6 years ago is that not only do the city's calls, so what this is based on calls for service, which is up here. So I'm taking actual current data on calls for service, figuring out how many calls per type of land use per unit, multiplying it then to get the total equivalent dwelling units. And that's what helps me determine how much share each of these land uses should have of the new capital. And what you see here is that if residential has obviously has one dwelling unit, a retail, every 1,000 square foot of retail is 6 times that many calls. So the police department responds to calls in retail facilities that much more often, and then less in industrial and office. So you will see this number got really much larger than before, because when I looked at the data that was pulled 5 or 6 years ago, it showed pretty much of almost more of a level calls for service. What I believe to have happened since then, as I looked at calls for service data, is the police department may have become more specific about how they were coding their calls. So I feel more comfortable with the call volume and the equivalent dwelling unit metrics that I'm using this time. But you can see if someone said, well, why on earth would this be so much more expensive than the other land uses? It's because retail is what drives the calls for service, and therefore growth in retail requires more of the capital.
So Anne, just a quick interruption. I remember back then talking about how there was a thought that retail had a lot higher call volume, but they didn't have the data. So it may have been that they started tracking it because of that.
Thank you, Jill. I appreciate that. That's and the police chief is with us if you have any questions about why that is. I'm of course only dangerous to imagine that in retail it probably results in theft and disruption calls. So if you're having a public disorderly conduct for particularly all of the theft calls that the police department is responding to, and those are being coded now under retail more specifically. But again, the chief is here if you have any questions about police.
And that's probably your summary for the police section, is that correct?
That is correct.
Very good, Jill, that was great feedback. Any questions for Ann on this first section on the police? Ann, I have one question for you, and it may carry over to the others. I don't have an answer to the question, but it's just interesting to me. On your summary, that last page we're just looking at there, if you can scroll up just a little bit there, there's a reference to the number of persons per unit. Right then, nope, I think it's down a little bit, actually.
Oh, right, it's right here.
Yep. So I found it interesting that the less than 700 square feet is only a 0.63 of a person. And I know we don't slice people into decimals, but my question is that an estimate based on vacancy rates, or can you tell me, because I know our housing is so full everywhere. I'm just surprised that number is as low as it is. Do you have, you may not have an answer. The first one.
This line right here. So this is based on census dwelling data that says this is on average how many people live in a unit under 700 square feet. And almost 2 people live in a unit of this size. This is the general average, 2,000 to 2,500 square feet, at least for a while, was the average residential dwelling size. And there were on average 2.5 people in a family. And as we get bigger, then the assumption that a larger home would have on average more people.
So I follow that, and I appreciate the analysis. We've heard it maybe a little bit in the past, but it's also a refresher for those who are new on the committee. Can you maybe as a homework assignment, but just verify that 0.63 number, less than 700 square feet, given that, I don't want to say it's wrong, it just seems like our vacancy rates here in the Treasure Valley are so, well, they are what they are. I would think that number might be a little higher, closer to 1, but if you could respond or maybe let me know outside of the meeting would be fine also. What's your response?
It may not, again, this kind of data is not collected on a local level. We're using data that comes from more of a national assumption. So I wasn't able to get this at our local level. So I can keep searching to see if I can find persons per unit data, at least in Idaho, maybe. Again, even though the census just came out with population, it's going to be many more months before they drill down to some of these smaller pieces. And I don't even know if the American Community Survey gets this granular, but definitely I will keep looking, because you're right. That's probably, for our own experience, at least right now, maybe a low number.
Thank you. And again, it's just seeking to make sure we have all the right, best available data for this. So I appreciate your help there.
And that's important, because if going forward, all, a majority of units that are under 700 square feet have 2 people in them, then we would be under collecting under that assumption.
I can't imagine any Boise State students piling 4 guys into a room. I'm sure that never happens here in Boise.
I see Travis has a question.
Travis, your turn. You're on
Thank
mute.
you. Thank
Go
you.
ahead. Corbin will be next. Go ahead, Travis.
Sure. So I had 2 things. I'd initially put up my hand just to flag that we do have Rob on the call right now with us, and he has a hard stop at 1. So if there's any questions as we're going through with regards to police and fire facility costs, feel free to pepper him with those before we lose him.
Okay.
And then the other thing that I was going to mention is the per person assumptions, and actually, Chairman Yorks, and your comment at the end of the last meeting got me thinking about this. I think your comment was specifically, do we need to change the dwelling sizes to make sure we're collecting enough impact fees? And I started looking at it, and I just was able to pull the last year's worth of data, just because we recently switched systems here at the city. So that was the only apples to apples data that I could get. But it was for the past year. And the bottom line is over half of our building permits, I think it was like 52 or 53%, were less than 1,400 square feet. So the issue that you just brought up about persons per household, like it really doesn't matter how you change the size brackets. It's the persons per household just
Right.
doesn't get you there to the total population that Ann had on that first page at the back here, based on what we're actually seeing, again, with 50% roughly going to the less than 1,400 square foot categories, it leaves us about a third shy in terms of population growth. So, if you assume that, again, the last year is representative of the next 10, you get the total number of units right, because that's the given, but the allocation is such that it results in, about a third less people than what the growth projections are showing. So I think we probably need to have a discussion around not only what the assumptions are, but also how we reconcile the assumptions with needing to get to full population growth. Right?
Totally get it. Thank you. Because that's exactly what I think we're all trying to strive for is representation of what really our best guess will happen based on recent. And that's why I provided the housing permit data to Ann as well, just to, which what you just verified is consistent. There's a lot, about half or a little more than half of the most recent permits over the last several years have been multifamily. So that would be consistent with what you just said as well. So thank you, Travis. Do you have any follow-up to that?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your technical drill down on that. That's great. And Ann, thanks for your support to that as well. That might mean new columns of categories per square foot, but I think that'll help get the accuracy to the city they need. Corbin, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
One question. So the reason it is under 1 is because of vacancies, right? On the national level.
It's just no.
Well, you can't have under 1. So, I mean, it'd be either 0
That
or
is
1.
true. I think it's just a statistical analysis that is, you can't have under 1. You're right. These are just the data source that the city used before, and I'm trying to keep consistent with that methodology, but this conversation is really underlying an opportunity for us to go back and see if we can update, this part right here to make it more relevant to us in our community.
Okay.
Thanks,
I
Corbin.
mean, sometimes people in apartments, I don't know, are just half there mentally, with if they are 4 BSU students, who knows what's going on. So,
And I don't know if you went to University of Idaho, but you can settle down now. Thank you.
I went to a private Catholic school in Seattle, so I don't have any game here. So.
Travis, you got a follow-up? Your hand is raised. Do you have more?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to point out that we've been trying to kind of recreate what Tanya did back in 2016. And the anomaly, at least a portion of the anomaly, is on the one hand, you're looking at data sets about number of bedrooms, number of humans, and then you're also correlating that number of bedrooms to size of home. And so it's not saying, okay, well, the average house is 2,200 square feet and has 3.2 people, and using that to drive everything, which might be a simpler kind of base level approach in terms of how we go about it this time. But and I apologize because I did mean to spend more time on this. I was just out last week. But what I would like to do is chat with Ann offline, come up with some different methodologies that we might be able to use that are also an equitable split, because I know that, and I don't know this, but I believe that I've heard said in the past at one of these meetings that, the reason for the 0.63 was partially to encourage the ADUs, the smaller, denser units. So reconciling kind of policy objectives with a consistent and mathematically equitable allocation is something that I want to talk more with Ann about, but I will have that for everybody next time.
Travis, I appreciate that. You and Ann, I know you're doing a lot, and others are doing a lot of legwork on this. We appreciate your you're sharpening, pushing the pencil for us. The intent is not to drag this out, but just from my perspective is to just get it right, or at least as right as we can. So thank you. Was there any further follow-up, Travis, on that? Okay, thank you. Chloe, can you scroll through? Are there any other hands raised?
No, sir.
Don't see comments in the chat. So Chief, for the police, I don't know if you had any further comments. Chief Lee.
None at this time, thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your participation as well, and your help through this as we're trying to help each other. And you get to move to the next one, fire.
Yay. Okay, there were questions again about the cost or the methodology that was used for costing facilities, including these facilities. This one's in yellow. It's exactly the same situation that I did in police. Was even though these number of square feet together is what's needed for growth, I broke it out over 2 10-year periods. So we wouldn't be assessing the whole growth period right up front. But I think there's some good information here that it was least interesting to me as I talked with engineering. So what we have done is taken actual costs per square foot from the station number 9 demolition and rebuild, which did not include land acquisition. So we've added in escalation for the years. We have added in 3 acres of land, market contingency, and that is resulting in that price per square foot. You can see, I mean, when we look at this from afar, you would say, how on earth could these fees go up so quickly? When I look at the fact that in the 2016 study, $270 per square foot was what was assumed, that is a very significant increase, which is why obviously being very disciplined about watching the cost data every year and updating, in a more routine or automatic way will be useful in the future. Engineering may also, since that time, has been doing a lot more facilities, and we may just have more accurate data on the cost per square foot. But I did, so kind of a double check with the city of Meridian. One of the committee members did ask for this to be done. So again, it's very difficult for me to see if I have an apples to apples comparison, and they probably were not, they did not give me the entire bid document for me to see. But they just recently approved a little over $6 million for a similarly sized station. They said it included construction and site improvements, but the land was already owned by the city. So I have no value in there. But if we used the same land value as the cities, we would be getting up above 738. Again, I don't know if Meridian, and I doubt they were including their FF&E, permitting contingency. I don't know their budget process well enough to know what they would have put in there. Often Meridian waits until the station gets half done, and then if there's change orders or overrides, they'll pull something from fund balance to be able to do that. Meridian and Boise don't really follow the same budgetary process there. I think Boise is trying to get a lot more ahead of making sure we're not short when we try to build something. And I think most often when we're building public safety facilities in Boise, we're ending up shorter, and the general fund is having to make up that difference. So here's, kind of an overview of.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
quick question. What I'm wondering is if in the 2016 CIP, the land was included in that cost per square foot.
No, it would not have been. No, this $270. No, so this 270 would be compared to the 671. So it's this difference that is driving a big portion of the. And I mean, and that's a good point. Is then I add land to that. Yes, excellent point. But this, just for some of your information, was explaining some of the kinds of differences in construction for fire stations. load that is required in those bays, for apparatus weight, noise transfer reduction between the bay and maintenance areas and the living quarters, all of the exhaust systems that are required in the bay doors. And we've included heavy duty washers in the training equipment and all of those, all of the stereotypical lounge chairs we always tease the chief about in the firehouses. So that's just sort of some explanation. And up here again, it obviously matters if we're building a 1-story or a 2-story facility. And I don't think we know that yet for these future facilities for Boise Fire, but I know many of the recents have been, we're building up. It depends on how much land is accessible. So again, I had to make a slight change here. It didn't change quite as much. You'll see that the calls per unit are much more similar between residential and retail, because obviously that's where the people generally are. And it's 70% or so of Boise Fire Department calls for services are medical. So that's driving that. The changes that I made by spreading out the logistics support facility, changed things a little bit. It brought this number, well, it brought all of the numbers down a little bit, but it also smoothed this out a little bit more. But you can see just part of the reason is we are not, our forecast is that there will not be a huge amount of more retail because of the density that we've already realized within the city of Boise, that it may be of all non-residential uses, maybe more office, and particularly the growth area would be to the south of Boise, and that will be industrial growth. So when I break it into these different pockets of land use, where retail might be having more police and fire calls, I'm also dividing it by fewer square feet of retail development, which gets kind of confusing, but just the math with the numerator and denominator means that they take a larger burden of the overall cost. So that's all I have on fire. Chief Niemeyer is, as was suggested earlier, dealing with COVID issues. And so Chief Gervais is with us today, and he can answer your questions as well.
Thank you, Ann, for your comments on fire. Oh, you say Romeo's on the line? I love picking on Romeo. I'm glad he's here today.
Me too, yeah.
It's great to be here.
Yes, all sincerity, thanks for being here. I'll open up to the committee before I have my one question. Any questions for Ann on the fire impact fees? Or do they need analysis there? Scroll through any. I don't see any chat. I don't see hands raised. Okay, I just had one question for you, Ann. If I missed somebody, please shout over the top of me. I'll pick you up because virtually I may not see all the hands. And if I saw the math right, on going to the total numbers, it looks like the CIP values are pretty much the same, but you spread some of those costs over to the future, like you said, over the 10 and then the 10 to 20 years. Makes sense. But then down on the bottom, I'm seeking to understand how it is that on the old numbers, on the fee per person is $594. The new number is now, scroll down a little further, please, Chloe, is about $630. That proposed number there per person is $630. The old number was $594 the month before. Can you teach?
That's the error that I had. It's the error that I had in the equivalent dwelling. I was overcharging office. And so when I corrected office and office dropped by about 50%, it pushed it back into all the other land uses. So the difference between that 594 and this 630 is I had miscalculated office. I was overcharging them. When I fixed the EDU calculations, that dropped theirs down into a number that made more sense. And this is a more accurate per person number.
Okay, so the number, and then likewise, you allocated those, spread the costs out. So that did two things, it raised and lowered the number. So it settled into the 630, is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions for Ann on fire before we move on? You know, I did want to ask Romeo that question, but I knew he had no chance of answering it, so I gave it to you, Ann, instead.
Oh, let's ask him anyway.
What Ann said.
Romeo learned
sure.
a long time ago that's the answer to that question. No.
Seriously, thanks for being here, Romeo. Do you have anything else you want to add to our conversation today?
I do not, I do know, and I don't know what, and do you know what, I guess I do. And do you know what station you were looking at for Meridian? Because I know they were talking about with 2 stations potentially having some economies of scale too, so that.
Oh, you're right. That's true. It's the one they just approved the budget for, but you're right. They used the same plans for the 2 stations and did
Right.
get some economy in that contract. And we are
So
not
I
assuming
mean-
that economy, but that might occur, right?
Right, because I think they're talking 7 and 8 building off the same basic concept. So there could be a little bit there. I don't know that it's going to answer the whole question, but certainly could help.
Romeo, I appreciate that. I mean, and I do get it. I mean, that number 11.5 million is a fat number that we don't have any details behind. And so I'll probably hold that one on the shelf for further discussion, just to really make sure we're not overdoing it just a little bit. Appreciate your willingness to allow us to keep watching that over time.
Absolutely.
Knowing that you just committed Mark to that, not yourself, but thank you. Okay, we'll move on to parks.
All right. I don't know if Jennifer's in the call, but these 3 parks, I
She
left.
is.
Okay.
She's here.
I left off the original CIP, so when I put them back in, just added this amount. Exact same thing with the relocation of the central shop. What's kind of difficult about estimating this is that the city is probably going to go find the land, then they're going to be doing some of this moving around in pieces. So I did again break it out to just be able to articulate of the overall cost, how many square feet is most likely related to growth, and then to do it over 2 10-year periods. Again, I did that same chart by planning area so that you could see what happened. And then I also updated the the level of service. So it hardly changed anything at all. So essentially we are either raising or lowering in each planning area by maybe 1/10 of an acre. So nothing's getting too far skewed from another area. And so these are the per person calculations based on the CIP for each planning area minus the amount of money that's sitting in the fund balance for each planning area divided by the number of persons. And that's how you get this chart. And that's really all I have to say about that. So.
Jennifer, you want to add anything?
No, I think you covered.
Okay. My first comment is I see McDevitt Park is now in there, so I'm sure you're going to get something there in the next 10 years.
Yep. Thank you for bringing that forward.
Actually, it's not just specific McDevitt, but obviously there's other areas of the city. So thanks for adding where there may have been some missing items. I'll open it to the group. Any questions for Ann or Jennifer on the parks numbers? Let's see, any hands raised or any questions? My only comment is I see the substantial increases in a couple of areas. Down at the bottom, there's Chloe, just a little further. Central Bench, for example, there's some tripling of numbers. Oops, we'll note down where we were before.
It's actually me that's scanning, so don't blame me.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'll give you credit, Chloe.
It's my screen, and okay, where do you want me to be?
No, so the red down below in the bottom, some of those percentages are triples, right? So big numbers there. And my recollection, just like Jill referring to the past, I remember the city had made some decisions in the past to incentivize growth in areas where they maybe didn't want to charge the full amount of eligible impact fee. And for good or for bad, I think that was some of the decisions that were made by council previously. They may want to do that again or not, but I'm sure that's partially why these fees in the Central Bench specifically jump so much because there was some, and I remember the downtown area, there was some no fee or some of the things were charged as well. So
And again, Mr. Chair, this assumes that the city is not paying fees for anyone. So if the city they do have a policy about affordable housing. So let's say I wanted to build affordable housing in the Central Bench, the city would be paying my impact fee. If they had
or some percentage of it, correct?
Or some percentage of it, right? So this would, this is not necessarily, this does not say that there are not those abilities to incentivize specific types. That policy hasn't been updated past affordable housing. But the other reason is and Jennifer can correct me, but I believe in the earlier iterations, there was kind of there's nothing else we can build in the Central Bench. And so we weren't collecting any money because there were nothing on the CIP. But not only have there become some opportunities with Franklin, Liberty, and Franklin, Liberty, Bora, but also you'll remember in the CIP for the Central Bench, they're focusing on connectivity. So
Right.
we have, $2 million here to create more park connectivity or more linear parks within the Central Bench to allow it to have the same kind of level of service that we may have in more discrete neighborhoods in that way. So yes, that number went up because there was not much in the CIP for Central Bench before.
One other question I have with regard to the park area, and because they're split up by regions like this versus the other two of police and fire, is one of the concerns is making sure you can spend the money you collect within the allowed time frame, meaning the 8 years, whatever the impact fee law suggests or requires, and making sure that you can actually spend the dollars you've collected, knowing that some areas of the city are growing more or less. And so I'm not suggesting you have any answers to that question, but I know that's always weighing in the back of your mind and the city's mind is making sure that they can actually collect enough money based on the permits that are pulled each year over the next 5 or 8 years. Then you can actually go and spend that money in those areas. Do you have any comment? It's not a question other than I'm sure you thought about it. Do you have any concerns? Probably the question. Do you have any concerns in any of those regional areas that there may not have adequate collection of fees to cover these?
Two answers to this question is I go back into all of the numbers to do a double check about if we grow the way we said we were going to grow. And again, Travis and I are going to dig down a little bit more into, and if we assume the number of people in houses are right. If I've established, which I believe I have, the right relationship between a person and their demand on parks, if we grow slower than we anticipated, we would not build everything in the CIP. And that's going to be your job with staff every year. We're going to look. And if for some reason growth tapers off, we'll update the CIP and dump some of these things off. Conversely, if we were to grow a lot faster, we will add things to the CIP. So the relationship between a person and their proportional share of a new acre will stay the same. That's how you don't, in the past, many, many years ago when people were at risk, and the city does very carefully track first in, first out to make sure that they're spending. But I think earlier methodologies in other cities, and I have never had a client who had to pay the money back because we check that at the beginning to make sure that we're not just randomly collecting money for something we're not going to buy. But yes, I feel confident that if all assumptions are correct, we have the right relationship and we can adjust as growth changes to make sure that we're not coming up short in an area. And then the way to not come up short is to reprioritize and dump things into the next 10-year period.
And I appreciate that answer. I see Tony's hand first and Travis. Go ahead, Tony.
I had a question, probably more for Jennifer than for Ann on this one. It's about the placement of the Alta Harris Park in the Southeast category. Given its size, what's the justification for putting it in Southeast and not putting it in the regional category?
Jennifer?
That's actually a good question. So 20 acres in our inventory is considered a community park. So it would have a service area that's around a mile, instead of something that's a little bit larger, like Marion Williams has a service area that's regional. It's closer to like 40 or 50 acres, but generally in that hierarchy of park size where we serve folks through the community parks, are considered part of the local park planning area instead of the regional area.
So based on size, and the 20 acres falls in that regional, I'm sorry, in that smaller size, not
Yeah.
regional. Tony, you have a follow-up?
Nope, that makes sense. I couldn't remember what that cutoff was, but that's a great explanation. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank
And
you.
if I can
Travis,
just-
oh, go ahead, Ann,
Jump-
first. Go
Jump on
ahead.
that before Travis gets in. You'll notice down here that the whole park is actually split into two pieces. So part of it is down in regional. So a large amount of that park is parking, and particularly related to recreational opportunities in the southeast. So that is being spread upon all users within the city. And that's how that might have changed over time.
I missed
Well,
that. Thank you, Ann.
That just muddied things up, but that was perfect explanation. Thanks, Ann.
Yeah, and as far as those recreational opportunities are concerned, we're really talking about the impact on the Barber Park, which is right across the Eckert Bridge. So the parking issues that they experience that are very significant in the summer months, the parking at Alta Harris could assist in alleviating a lot of those regional, it's a regional draw, and we get users from all over the country. So the intent is really to help alleviate that as much as we can with the addition of, like, we have 220 parking spaces planned for Alta Harris Park. And the use pattern of the floaters is they generally are out when it's really hot and nobody's recreating in a park. So it's complementary as far as like the timing is concerned.
Outstanding. Thanks for that.
Sure.
I love that.
Can't talk about floaters all day.
Travis, your turn. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to add to your question on kind of the aging of the impact fees. You know, right now, we've got 3 years kind of accrued in River North or the North River area. That's going to be used largely on Stewart Gulch and Memorial Park, which is this year's project. Southeast is Barber has 6 years accrued, but Barber Park's going to take care of I think all of that, and probably put us actually in a deficit. And then the Central Bench has 6 years as well accrued, excuse me. But like the Southeast, that'll be more than offset with the Franklin Park project this year. So effectively, kind of come the end of the next fiscal year, everything will pretty much be a clean slate. So
Travis, thank you. That's very quick and great. Thanks for a quick analysis there. Appreciate that. Okay, looking for other hands. Any other hands raised or any other questions for Ann on parks? Okay, I don't see any. Great job on the report and the response and all the work that's being done by everyone. It's a big effort. I really appreciate it. I know the committee appreciates your efforts here. Ann, I guess I'll ask the question, what do you think your next steps are?
Well, clearly Travis and I are gonna put our heads together and really look into these assumptions here and see how we may inform that better by more local data, which will then change. It's not going to change the per person cost, but if we raise this to 1, for example, then this would be $630 and not $397. So we'll have to make those adjustments and bring it back to the committee. But after that point, I think we're ready. And perhaps at the same time, I will bring a written report to you at your next meeting so that you have something to more officially respond to.
Thank you. So you're looking at the persons per unit, and you'll also look at the breakdown of the dwelling sizes if you want to modify those to make sure that you're capturing. Yeah, okay.
Right.
Very good. Thank you very much for this report. Any other discussions or questions for Ann? If not, I'll go to the further on the agenda here. Okay, hearing none. Thank you again for your presentation. Last item on the agenda is committee updates. And so I'll open it up for the group. whether it's Jennifer or it says Chief Lee or Chief Niemeyer, though it's not Chief Niemeyer. Anybody have anything you want to add further to the discussion today for the committee? Okay, I don't hear any updates, so thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions. Rob, we were sensitive of your time. I think we may have made it here. There's both Robs here. But with that in mind, if there's no further discussion, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the 12 or 9/8 meeting.
Thanks, Corbin. Is there a second?
Like a second?
Okay, I heard a second. Thank you very much. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Carries. Motion meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.